11 Most Evil Serial Killers in Human History. A serial killer is a criminal that has committed at least 3 murders in a time frame from several days to several years between each of the crimes. Some modern criminologists, however, think a serial killer is defined, regardless of the number of victims, by his intrinsic motivation. It seems some of those serial killers find some degree of pleasure in torturing and killing their victims. Their conscience is dead, so the plea of the victims will not change anything. That's why serial killers are generally defined as psychopathic. In this video, you will discover 11 most evil serial killers in human history. They torture innocent children as well as adults before they murder them. Brace yourself for the list, but before we proceed, kindly subscribe to the channel and press the bell icon to help us grow on YouTube. This video is partially sponsored by DelvixGarden.com, your source for high-quality food supplements and personal care products at low prices. This company has a range of premium products for your health, beauty, and personal care, including organic pine pollen, ceremonial-grade matcha, medicinal herbs, hair dye shampoo, and plant-based protein for weight loss. There are links in the description. Kindly visit their store and use the coupon code FIRST20% to get 20% discount on your first order. Here are 11 most monstrous serial killers in the world. 11. Ken Padimar Shankaria, 1952 to May 16, 1979. This monster was an Indian serial killer who was born in Jaipur, Rajasthan in 1952 and arrested at the age of 26. He confessed that he killed at least 70 people in 1977 to 78 for pleasure. He killed his victims by hitting them with a hammer on the neck below the ears, which gained him his moniker Ken Padimar, which means one who hits under the ear. But his reign did not last long. He was convicted in early 1979 and was hanged at Jaipur on May 16, 1979. He repented, and his last words before being hanged were, "I have murdered in vain. Nobody should become like me." 10. Mikhail Viktorovich Popkov, born March 7, 1964. Mikhail is a Russian serial killer and rapist who sexually assaulted and murdered 78 women between 1992 and 2010 in Angarsk, Irkutsk, and Vladivostok in Siberia. He is known as the Werewolf and the Angarsk Maniac for the brutal nature of his crimes. Popkov's crimes were motivated by suspicions that his wife had committed adultery. His victims were all women between the ages of 16 and 40, apart from one male, a police officer. The female victims were prostitutes or inebriated young women, people who Popkov considered immoral. At various points between 1992 and 2010 in Angarsk, Irkutsk, and Vladivostok, a distance of some 3,900 kilometers, Popkov, dressed in his police uniform, lured victims with his promise of a free ride and sexually assaulted them. He killed women with instruments including knives, axes, baseball bats, and screwdrivers, and mutilated the bodies so grotesquely that Russian media ascribed the crimes to the Werewolf and the Angarsk Maniac. One of Russia's most prolific serial killers, Popkov, was convicted of 22 murders in 2015 and confessed to 59 additional homicides 3 years later. On December 10, 2018, he was convicted for 56 of the 59 additional homicides. For 3 killings, the police could not find proof. Popkov received a second life sentence. There were calls for Popkov to be executed, but this was unavailable as capital punishment is not allowed in Russia. 9. Javed Iqbal Umayyar, 1956 to October 8, 2001. Javed was a Pakistani serial killer who confessed to the sexual assault and murder of 100 boys, ranging in age from 6 to 16. Iqbal strangled the victims, dismembered the corpses, and dissolved them in acid as a way to conceal the evidence. In December 1999, Iqbal sent a letter to police and a Lahore newspaper chief news editor, Kawar Naheem Hashmi, confessing to the rape and murder of 100 runaway boys, all aged between 6 and 16. In the letter, he claimed to have strangled and dismembered the victims, mostly runaways and orphans living on the streets of Lahore, and disposed of their bodies using vats of hydrochloric acid. He then dumped the remains in a local river. Inside Iqbal's house, police and reporters found bloodstains on the walls and floor, along with the chain with which Iqbal claimed to have strangled his victims, and photographs of many of his victims in plastic bags. Javed Iqbal Umayyar was found guilty and sentenced to death in the same manner that he killed the boys, being strangled first, then cut into 100 pieces in front of the parents of the victims, and then to be dissolved into acid. But he committed suicide before the sentence could be carried out. 8. Pedro Alonso Lopez, born October 8, 1948. Pedro is a Colombian serial killer who was sentenced for killing 110 girls, but who claimed to have raped and killed more than 300 girls across Colombia, Peru, and Ecuador. Lopez became known as the Monster of the Andes in 1980 when he led police to 53 graves in Ecuador. The victims were all girls, 12 years of age. In 1983, he was found guilty of the murder of 110 girls in Ecuador. He further confessed to an additional 240 murders in Peru and Colombia. Lopez claimed that during his incarceration for car theft, he was brutally gang-raped, and that subsequently, while he was still in prison, he hunted down the most brutal of his rapists and killed them. He said that after being released from prison, he moved to Peru and started murdering young girls. Lopez claimed that by 1978 he had killed over 100 girls before being caught and captured by members of an indigenous tribe. These captors were preparing to execute him when a Christian missionary from the U.S. intervened and persuaded them to hand him over to the state police. However, the police had quickly released him. Lopez said that he had subsequently returned to Colombia and later moved to Ecuador. During this period, he claimed, he had killed about 3 girls a week. Lopez said, "I like the girls in Ecuador. They are more gentle and trusting, more innocent." 7. Luis Garavito, Colombia. Luis Alfredo Garavito Cubillas, also known as La Bestia, the Beast, or Tribilin, Goofy, is really the worst serial killer the world has ever known so far. He really fits the nickname La Bestia. Luis Garavito is a Colombian rapist and child serial killer who has confessed in 1999 to have tortured, raped, and killed 147 young boys. But it is believed that the total number of victims would be over 300 based on skeletons found by his instructions. The innocent victims were mostly poor children, peasant children, or street children between the ages of 8 and 16. Ironically, at the end, the sinister criminal was sentenced for only 22 years, with the possibility for earlier release in case of further cooperation and good behavior. 6. Daniel Camargo Barbosa, Colombia No. 2. Daniel Barbosa, born in Colombia January 22, 1930, came in second position as the world's most evil serial killer. Daniel Barbosa crossed Colombia and Ecuador in the 1970s and 80s, raping and killing at least 150 girls. He himself confessed to killing only 71 girls in Ecuador, after escaping from a Colombian prison. Not content with simply killing them, he butchered them with a machete. After his arrest, he helped the local authorities to find the bodies of the victims he abandoned here and there. In 1989, Daniel Barbosa was convicted and has served 16 years before being killed in prison in 1994 by the cousin of one of his innocent victims. 5. Donald Henry Gaskins, USA. Donald Henry Pee Wee Gaskins, Jr. was a sadistic American serial killer who murdered up to 110 individuals between 1953 and September 1982. 2 of his darkest crimes involved raping and murdering Doreen Dempsey, age 23 and 8 months pregnant, and her 1-year-old daughter. He was arrested in 1975 after the confession of a partner who claimed to have seen him killing 2 young men. During interrogation, Gaskins boasted of killing between 80 and 90 victims, which he later increased to 110 while on death row. He had been convicted of 8 murders and sentenced to death, which had been changed to life imprisonment without the possibility of release. On September 2nd, 1982, however, Gaskins committed another murder for which he earned the title Meanest Man in America. He was finally sentenced to death and executed on September 6, 1991, in Columbia, South Carolina. 4. Serhiy Fedorovich Kach, Ukraine, Russia. Serhiy Kach, being a former Ukrainian police criminal investigator, was supposed to be a protector, not a destroyer of lives. But he had a double identity. The maniac confessed to have killed 100 people, all girls aged 8 to 18 years. He also sexually abused their bodies after they were dead. Although Kach admitted his dark and gruesome acts and demanded the death penalty, after a 1-year trial in 2006, a tribunal in Dnipropetrovsk sentenced him to life imprisonment for the rape and murder of 36 women and girls over more than 2 decades. It was discovered later that 9 innocent men were wrongly imprisoned for crimes committed by Kach. Sadly, one of them committed suicide in prison. It took years for another to be released in March 2012. 3. Pedro Rodrigues Filho, Brazil. Pedro Rodrigues Filho, nicknamed Pedrinho Matador, Killer Petey, was born on June 17, 1954, in Santa Rita do Sapucaí, Brazil. He started his bloody campaign at the age of 14 by killing the vice-mayor of Alfenas, Minas Gerais, to avenge his father, a school guard who was accused and fired for stealing the school kitchen's food. Pedrinho Matador also killed drug dealers to avenge the death of his girlfriend, who was murdered while he was in prison for theft. By the time Filho reached 18, he had already killed 10 people. In 2003, he was sentenced to 128 years in prison for killing 71 people. It is not over yet. In prison, he killed his own father, who was also there for murder. It would have killed 47 other prisoners, and was subsequently sentenced to 400 years in prison. 2. Tommy Lynn Sells, USA. Tommy Sells is often considered as one of the most dangerous criminals Texas has ever had. According to his account, he killed for the first time at 16 while breaking into a house where he found a man performing fellatio on a young boy. The killings had continued ever since until he has murdered 70 people between 1985 and 1998. Some of the murders are brutal: beatings, cutting throats. He was finally arrested while attempting to murder a 10-year-old girl. Fortunately, the description given by the girl led to his arrest. He was sentenced to death and executed on April 3, 2014. Tommy Lynn Sells' sentence was carried out at the Texas State Penitentiary, Huntsville, by lethal injection. 1. Harold Shipman, UK. Harold Frederick Shipman was not just any serial killer. He was a physician serial killer. He changed his vocation from saving lives to taking them. He is known as the most prolific serial killer in British history, and possibly around the world. Most of his victims were women, about 80%. The exhumation of some bodies revealed that they were killed by lethal injection of diamorphine, a type of strong opioid. Prosecutors believe Shipman killed those patients after he had altered their wills to inherit large sums of money. Although he was accused of killing up to 250 people, on January 31, 2000, a jury found Shipman guilty of 15 murders only. He was sentenced to 15 concurrent life sentences without any possibility of release. But on January 13, 2004, one day before his 58th birthday, he hanged himself in his cell at Wakefield Prison in West Yorkshire. As of today, Shipman is the only British doctor who has been found guilty of murdering his patients.